Okay, I'm back. This is episode 2 of CSS Grid. So let's crack back into it. Up to this point, all the properties that have been discussed are for grid containers. The grid column property is the first one for use on the grid items themselves. So the hypothetical horizontal and vertical lines that create the grid are referred to as lines. These lines are numbered starting with 1 at the top left corner and the grid and move right for columns and down for rows, counting upward. This is what the lines look like for a 3x3 grid. So you have 3 elements by 3 elements, but that corresponds to 4 lines by 4 lines. Because it's just when you have a grid, you're gonna have n elements plus 1 lines to fully contain it, because you have n left lines, then you have to add on 1 right line at the very end. So that's a way of thinking about it. Just think that it's always 1 more line than element. So to control the amount of columns an item will consume, you can use the grid column property in conjunction with the line numbers you want the item to start and stop at. So here's an example. So grid column 1/3. Yeah, so it's pretty much, it's not difficult to code. It's just you have to just learn these like kind of complicated, almost like top secret ways of expressing it. So it's kind of cool in that way. Just imagine you're like Neo in the Matrix and you're figuring out all these this weird cool language that gets you rich making websites. Okay, this will make the item start at the first vertical line of the grid on the left and span to the 3rd line of the grid, consuming 2 columns. So it'll start at the first vertical line of the grid on the left. So it's going to start at line 1. It's going to span to the 3rd line. So therefore it's going to span through these 2 elements. So now you can control, so you can see here there's a 3x3 grid. Only 5 elements are being used. They're all colored differently by this code right here, and these are just empty elements. So now I can only assume that we're going to make them get larger, and look at that, we're going to make item 5 consume 2 columns. So for item 5, you do it right in the style sheet, in the has a class item 5, which is a custom class. And for the custom class item 5, custom meaning that we're just defining it ourselves. It's not, you can also do a different class. Like there's predefined classes, like the class container is a maybe not. I believe container might be a real thing, or I'm not sure if it's also a defined one. But there's like some classes that are predefined in like the source in the API or something. If there's API, anyways. I code in a lot of languages, I forget sometimes. Anyways, background pale green. So this is element 5. We want to span, let's go from 2 to 4. So grid column 2/4. So now look at that, it's stretched out and it now occupies these two columns. My god, I can't think right now. Okay, so run the tests. It's satisfied. I love satisfying you, free code camp. That was a weird thing to say. CSS Grid. Use grid row to control spacing. Of course, you can make items consume multiple rows just like you can with columns. You define the horizontal lines you want an item to start and stop using grid row. So using grid row again, they want item 5 to be a 2x2 now instead of a 1x2. I think when you're doing like n by m for matrices, at least if you've ever done a mathematical matrix, n is always rows, m is always columns. So it's rows by columns. So right now it is 1 row by 2 columns, so it'd be a 1x2 element. And now we're going to make it a 2x2 element by giving this also a value of 2, 4. So it's going to go from line 2 through line 3 to line 4. So now it's the big daddy element 2x2. It's the boss element now. These are all its little bitches. pardon me. It's little underlings. It's probably a more appropriate word. On PC, we're cool. On PC, we're cool. CSS Grid. Align an item horizontally using justified self. In CSS Grid, the content of each item is located in a box, which is referred to as a cell. You can align the content's position within a cell horizontally using the justify self property on a grid item. By default, this property has a value of stretch, which will make the content fill the whole width of the cell. The CSS Grid property accepts other values as well. So start aligns the content to the left, center aligns the content to the center, and aligns the content to the right end of the cell. So for item 2, we're going to try all of them just for our own knowledge. So the justify self property, right now let's go start. So now it's justified at the start. Let's go center. So now it's only occupying the width of the element instead of the entire thing. Because right now we have it with a grid gap of 10 pixels, so it's just going to occupy the entire thing. And the grid gap is going from for both apparently. I guess if you just do one, I thought it would do. But if you just do one, it'll apply to both. But if I do this, now I'm doing rows by columns, okay. But if I don't do this, okay, interesting. Justify self-center. So now it's going to remove all the buffering and just go only be as wide as the has to be, but it'll be as full length apparently. If I do center, will it? Nope, then it does not work. And if we do end, it'll go to the right hand side. So they want center. That's what you get with that. Just as you can align an item horizontally, there's a way to align an item vertically. So you now use align self. Align self can go start. Now you're just working with the up-down motion of it. Which is appropriate to say because when you're on a computer monitor, it's always kind of normal to the ground, the monitor, meaning it's kind of like in a plane, same plane as the wall. So you can actually go left, right, up, down, and it'll make sense. So for the up-down direction, we're going to do, they want end, let's just do them all. Center, that's that, end, it's going to do that. Now if we do them both, put this in the center, now it's both, but they don't want that. So onwards. Sometimes you want all the items in your CSS grid to share the same alignment. You can use the previously learned properties and align them individually, or you can align them all at once horizontally by using justify items on your grid container. This property can accept all the same values you learned about in the previous two challenges. The difference being that it will move all the items in our grid to the desired alignment. So now we have justify items. Justify items will be going to control them all. Control them all. But only so justify is left, right, and the other one was what, align. Alignment is for up, down. Let's put a tab here to make it look nice. 2 tabs to make it look nice. So they wanted the justification to be in the center. I'm not sure if justification is a actual technical word, or it's just the word they arbitrarily used in CSS, but that's definitely something to research on your own to expand your knowledge. So align all items vertically using align items. Using the align items property on a grid container will set the vertical alignment for all the items in our grid. Use it now to move all the items to the end of each cell. Container class should have a align items property that has a value of end. So as I predicted from the previous one, there's an align items, and it has those 3 options. So end is going to make it. Did it work? Okay, it worked. So they all got pushed to the bottom of the cell now. So just to show the difference, center would be this, end would be this. Okay. Onwards we go. Okay, so I'm going to cut the video here. Thank you very much for watching. Check us out on social media. If you want private coding tutoring, send me an email below. We have a Patreon. Like, subscribe, comment, and thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the series.